Hi everyone, my name's Arlene Smith and I want to welcome you to my Arlene D Online second video that's going to be a cute little project tonight. We're going to be doing something that's called Majolica or Majolica. I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced depending on, I guess, where you're from. But actually what that means is we're going to be painting on top of a glaze that has not been fired yet using brush strokes. And tonight we're going to be featuring Duncan's True Matte, which is a non-moving glaze in a dark blue. Let me show you the piece. So here's the piece. So it's a dark blue, and then we're going to be creating white daisies on top using white easy strokes and French dimensions, which allows us to do light colored flowers on top of a dark background. I hope you'll enjoy it tonight. It's a little longer video than normal, but that's okay. We're going to have a good time. But let me show you, let me put the thing down and let's show you the things that we're going to be using tonight. Okay, so let me move this out of the way. So, brushes, we're going to be using a Duncan SB807, which is a number 6 Fan Glaze Brush. We're going to be using, excuse me, a Duncan 812, SB812, which is a number 10 round. Or you could use a number 8 round if you like to do smaller, like to use a smaller brush. An SB802 liner, a pipette or an eyedropper. I call these eyedroppers, some people call them pipettes. A stylus, a palette knife, a quarter, sponge, ruler, and you'll be using a pencil, but on my piece I used a marker so that you guys could see what I'm doing. So let's get started. First thing I want to talk to you about is applying the glaze to the piece, because most of you probably know that when you apply glaze, it needs to be a nice smooth coat, usually in one direction, and we want to make sure that the glaze is the right consistency so that we don't have brush marks on there. So let's start with that. So let me get out here. This is the True Matt Indio 314. I'm going to put some out on a palette. I've already poured some out before, but I'm going to add a little bit more to it. I always work on a palette so that I make sure that I don't contaminate my jar. We're going to be using a fan brush. You're going to wet the fan brush in water, and then what I always do is I tap it on a paper towel, or in this case I use a doggy pad for my under my projects. Then you're going to load the brush, and when you load the brush, you're going to load it on one side, turn it over, and load on the other side. Now you can see the color goes almost up to the ferrule, but not quite. You want to make sure that you have a completely loaded brush. Before we start, the first thing we want to do is take a damp sponge and wipe our piece down to make sure that we remove any dust and prepare the piece for painting. So now I have my brush loaded, so I'm going to brush across. So brush across. And as you notice, what I'm doing is I'm going halfway and pulling. What that does is it helps it from running drips underneath. Continue. Keep loading the brush, and you notice how often I'm loading the brush. Because the one thing I don't want to see is I don't want to see you guys, oops, excuse me, painting any fences. And when I say painting fences, I mean doing this. Because when you spread the glaze that thin, you're actually taking off as much as you're putting on, and that's why some people have pieces that don't have enough glaze on them, even though you've put the required amount that the bottle requires. So you want to make sure that that's good, going in one direction only. We don't do cross-hatching anymore. You want to make sure that the product is thin enough that it doesn't leave any brush strokes. So as you can see, there's no, I think you can see that, let me see here. There's no brush strokes, it's nice smooth coats, okay? We're going to apply let that dry to a chalky look, and then we're going to apply 2 more coats. I'm not gonna have you watch me put on 3 coats though, because we don't need to do that. I've already got my piece prepared for tonight. Let me grab a paper towel here. Okay. So let me get that fan brush out of the way because we're done with that for tonight. We're done with that. All right. So what we're going to do here is, here's the plate. Now the plate that it was a sample plate was actually the honeycomb salad plate, but the plate I'm using tonight is a dinner plate only because I didn't have another salad plate to do my sample on. So just bear with me, but it will work no matter which size plate that you use. Let me get down a little bit more here, and let me see if I need to move this a little closer here. There we go. Down just a little, up just a little bit more there. Okay, so I'm hoping you can all see those marks that I have on there. So what I did at very first is I took my quarter, laid it in each corner, took a pencil, which you'll be using for all your marks, and just drew around it, okay? And you're gonna do that in all 6 corners. Then I took my ruler, and what I did is I measured between the 2 centers, and it was like 3 inches, a little over 3 inches. So what I did is I measured 1.5 inches out from this corner, from this center out 1.5 inches, and from this center out 1.5 inches, okay? So that means when I do my strokes, these will all be the same length. Now I don't normally do that, I just eyeball it, but I would like you guys to be really comfortable when you do this, so I want you to mark 1.5 inches. So you're gonna actually go out from this, the center out actually another 1.5 inches. So all 3 of these petals will be exactly 1.5 inches, and then when you go to fill in, they will also be all the same size, okay? So, now I want to set this aside for just a second because I want to talk to you just a little bit about using the brush, especially the round and the liner brush. We're going to take a little more time with those tonight, guys. And instead of using the white that we're going to be using on the petals, because I'm on white paper, I'm going to be using a different color to show you how I want you to do the brush strokes, okay? So I'm going to put some color out on my palette. Let me move this back so you can see it, okay? And the one thing I never, ever, 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 ever do is mix my paint with my brush. If you're using a natural hair brushes, which is what I'm using, and that's, if you're doing brushstroke work, you want a better grade of brush. And so you want to make sure that they're natural hair brushes. Those are the best. Okay, so I want you to see how I'm thinning that down with a few drops of water so that it is a brush consistency. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and with my large number 10 round, I'm going to put my brush in the center of that, and I'm going to pull out. I want to make sure that my brush is completely filled with product, so you can see I've almost gone up to the ferrule, not quite, because we don't want to get any paint in underneath that metal ferrule. This is the ferrule here of the brush, okay? And in fact, the parts of the brush, this is the reservoir, that's the hair that holds the paint. This is the ferrule, and of course this is the handle. So now that I've got my brush completely filled, So when I start my petal, and I'm going to pull from the outside of the petal in towards the center. So I'm going to tip my brush, press it, pull it, and lift it back to a point. All right? So tip, tip, press, pull, and lift, so that you have a really nice point. Okay? Do that one more time. Tip, press, pull, and lift. Now the thing that you can remember, the harder you push down, the fatter the hairs on the brush are going to spread out. So if I spread it out a lot, you can see how far they spread out. So I can get a pretty wide stroke. If I don't want it to be quite as wide, I'm not going to push down as much. And you can see I'm not rushing it. Think of the brush as an extension of your hand. In other words, when you do brush strokes, you tip, press, pull, and lift. And if you watch, my hand is moving, not the brush. Because what happens when you move the brush and not your hand is you're going like this, and when you get down to get that nice fine point, you're going to have like little flippy hairs right here. I don't know if you can see those. Let me see if I can. So I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me see if I can get closer to where you can see the hairs on there. Okay, right here on this guy right here. So you guys got little hairs. I'm trying to get that in the center of the camera so you can see it. Okay. So always make sure, don't be in a rush. There's nothing that requires us to do speed. So it's going to be tip, press, pull, back slowly, lift it to the point. And if you have to, you can twist the brush just a little bit, okay? So twist the brush just a little bit. All right? So that's what we're going to be doing with this round brush tonight. Now, as I said before, we're painting on, you know, it doesn't look like it's a dark blue background, but trust me, when it's fired, it is this dark blue color. So in order to use Easy Strokes, Easy Strokes is color pigment and it's translucent. So we want to make sure that we can make it a little more opaque. So by doing that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take one of my little palettes. I use these little plates for palettes. And I'm going to put white Easy Strokes. Okay, so I'm going to put some white Easy Strokes out here. And I'm not going to thin this with water yet because I'm going to add French dimensions to it, and then I'm going to add water to it. So then I'm going to take my French dimensions, instead of trying to squeeze it through this little tiny tip here, I'm going to pull this tip off. Okay? And then I'm going to squeeze out as much French dimensions as I have Easy Strokes. Okay? I'm going to put that tip back on yet until I make sure I have enough here. Then I'll put the tip back on. Then I'm going to take my palette knife, like I said, don't use your brushes, and I'm going to mix it. And what this French Dimensions does, because French Dimensions is a solid, opaque, raised gloss glaze. So what it's going to do is it's going to make these Easy Strokes more opaque than translucent. Now I want to make sure that my Easy Strokes are thin enough for brush consistency. So I'm adding maybe 3 or 4 drops of water, and I'm going to mix it up. Sorry you can't see this better, guys, on this white plate. Okay, so now it's a nice brush consistency. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this guy over, take our plate, and get the plate where it's in the center where you can see what I'm doing. Okay, let me adjust this baby a little bit. Let's see, do we need to get closer? And maybe more this way. There we go. I'm going to back up just a little bit. There we go. Okay. So I've wet my brush. Now I'm going to take it, I'm going to load it in the mixture. Okay? So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start. So when I paint, I do the center one down, then the two outside ones, and then I fill in. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to press, and I'm going to pull. And this is a shame because you can't see that. Okay, so let's do plan B. I'm going to use a darker color. Oh, come on. So that you can see what I'm doing. Okay? Because white on this light background doesn't show up. So I'm going to tip it, press, pull, and I'm going to lift. Okay? So that's petal number one. I'm going to load, and I'm going to go to the edge here and tip, press, pull, and lift. And then I'm going to go turn it around, and always turn your plate so that basically you're pulling towards you, and you're always going to start at the outside mark and pull towards the center. So tip, press, pull, and lift. And if you get some on the center, don't worry about it, because the yellow is going to be mixed with white also, so it will show up. It will cover anything that's in the center. So now I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to tip and fill in one more here and turn it. Tip, pull, press, pull, and lift. Okay. Oh, I have to sneeze a minute here, guys. Sorry. Oh. Load the brush, starting at the center, pulling down again. Oops. And starting at that mark and pulling down again. Okay, then we're going to go and do the same thing here. This is a fun little project. I love doing this. It's a easy brush stroke to learn. And like I said, if you're doing a smaller plate, you could use a smaller round brush, or if you're more comfortable with the smaller one rather than this big 10 brush, you could actually do 2 strokes instead of 1. But I'm going to leave that up to you, because I want you to be comfortable with the brush. Because a 10 round sometimes, oops, that wasn't good. I'm going to tip it in a little bit of water here, because I'm under these lights, it's drying my paint out. Okay. And I have to tell you folks, if you want to get good at doing brush strokes, there's a couple of things. Number one, you need to have a good quality brush, particularly, mainly probably not a tack-on brush, because number one, they don't hold enough paint and they don't spring back as well as the natural hair brushes. And I know nowadays sometimes it's hard to get 100% natural hair brush, but you know what? If you can get one that's majority is natural hair, that's a good thing. Okay. So you see, I'm one that loads my brush every time I do a brush stroke. Only because I want to make sure, because remember, I probably wouldn't do that if I was on a background that wasn't so dark, but I want to make sure that my brush strokes are fairly solid so that the background doesn't show through. And I'm going to tell you, when you do this, if when that first coat dries, and by the time you get around to getting them all done, that first coat should be dry, is what you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't see a lot of the background through that brush stroke. Because some of you probably don't press as hard as someone who's been doing this a long time. So I want you to remember to, it's better to have 2 coats than not have enough. Okay. The one thing I'll say too, when you're doing these, because you could do like full daisies, and what I will tell you on a full daisy is, like on this one, is if you start and you want to make sure that your petals are all consistent and that you don't end up with what I call a pinwheel, which means that some of your brush strokes begin to curve around like it's a pinwheel, is you want to do what I call north-south, east-west. So you're going to pull in this stroke here, and then you'll go to the bottom and pull this, but you're going to turn the plate so you're always pulling towards you. And then once you have that, the north-south done, you're going to turn it and do what I consider east and west. And then you will fill in. So basically you'll have 8 petals. If you want to do a 6 petal, what you're going to have to remember is you need to do what's considered a Y. And I'll show you in a second what I mean on a piece of paper, which I think will help you a little bit maybe when you go to do brush strokes. Okay. And last but not least, okay. All right. So now we have all of our petals pulled in. Like I said, if you need to put in a second coat, and better safe than sorry if you're doing this for the first time, I would do it. I'll probably do a second coat. Okay. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take some white French dimensions, and we're going to add, this is yellow-orange, and the reason I'm using yellow-orange rather than lemon yellow is because by putting it into white, it lightens it up. So I'm going to mix this with some white here. And again, you want to make sure that whenever you're using easy strokes or a mixture of easy strokes and French dimensions, that all of your paints are the same consistency. So the yellow needs to be the same consistency as the white was, or in this particular case, the pink. Okay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is get my brush. I'm going to clean it in water. Okay, I'm going to load the brush, and then I'm going to paint in my centers. And you notice what I'm kind of do is put it down, turn it, and make like a C. And of course you can see on mine that the where I use the Sharpie, it's showing through. But remember, the Sharpie and the pencil both fire away. The one thing you want to remember is you want to make sure that you connect all the petals with the center. And this is going to take 2 coats, because remember, yellow is a much more translucent color, and we want to make sure again that the blue doesn't come through. So I would definitely do 2 coats on the yellow as well. Okay, so there we go. I'm not going to take the time to do a second coat because we want to not keep you any longer than we have to. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to take our liner brush, and this is the brush that people go, oh my goodness gracious. And people have a tendency to have this fear of a liner brush. And I think it's because people have not shared with you what I call the rules. So I'm going to be using black. You could use a dark navy blue if you wanted to, but I'm going to be using black. Black is what's on the sample. I'm going to put some black on my palette. Now when you use a liner brush, it's very important that you thin the product down more than normal. And that's so that it flows off the brush. Okay, and again I'm going to mix that with my palette knife. And I want it to be like the consistency of ink. Or, for those of you who never had a fountain pen in your life or know what ink is, it's like thin milk, I guess, for lack of a better, I say like 1% milk. It's not like skim milk, not as thin as skim milk, but skim milk you can see through, and 1% milk you can't see through. Now the second rule is, let me get my little piece of paper here. The second rule is that you want to make sure that you load the brush. So I always pretend like this is the top of my tree, okay? And so I'm going to put the brush in the center and I'm going to pull out. So I'm pulling in the trunk of the tree. And I'm twisting my brush to make sure that I get that brush completely loaded with color. Okay? And then I also want to make sure that the tip is a real nice point, that I don't have like a blob of paint in the very tip. And if I have an extra heavy tip with paint, I just kind of tap it until I have a nice, really fine point. Now when you use a liner brush, which most of us will hold the brush like we hold a pencil. If we use it like we do a pencil, we're going to be using the side of the hair, so the brush stroke is going to be a lot wider. So we want to make sure that we keep the brush up on its very tip. So when you put it on the very tip of the brush, and remember, you don't see me doing this, you're going to see me move my hand. You get nice fine lines. You also will notice that I'm resting the side of my hand on the plate or on the piece of paper, and what that does is it keeps the brush the same distance all the time from the piece. Okay? Now there are times when you want, like when I do leaves, let's see, can I do one here with this? I don't know. Oh, I might have a smaller brush here, let me see. When you do a leaf, okay, let me get some of this yellow, it's good. When you do a leaf, oh I'm gonna sneeze, sorry guys. When you do a leaf, okay, I think you can see that maybe. Can you see that? Maybe I need to use something a little bit darker. Let me try, where's that pink at again? Oh, right here. Okay. When you do a leaf. Oops. Add a couple of drops of water. Mix it. Now the reason I don't use my brush, because you know you're spending sometimes, you know, $12, $13 for a brush, and you don't want to be mixing paints with the brush because it breaks down the hair. So I'm going to load, and then to make a leaf I'm going to do, okay, and you can see that better maybe. So when I go to outline that leaf, I hope this is going to work, still pretty wet, is I do what I call thick and thin. So on one side of the leaf I put it down and I press down, and then I come back up to a fine tip. And on the other side I just do a little short line like that. Okay, and then of course you would put the vein down the center, but I can't do it because this is way too wet, alright? Okay, so now, like I said, this is going to take practice. So what I would always recommend to my students to do is to go get you a book with you know, paper in it that's smooth, not an artist book where it has paper that's bumpy, but a smooth paper. And practice. Get that water off that brush. And practice. And I guarantee you, if you put a brush in your hand for maybe no longer than 10 or 15 minutes a day for 30 days, you'll see such a difference in your brush strokes. Wow, that's kind of blurry. Do I need to get closer? Let's see here. Can I get closer? That don't make it any better, I don't think. Maybe back further is better. Yeah, that's better, I think. Okay. It's not quite so blurry. So what I want you to do is on my centers I have what I call radiating lines. And it's like little accent lines on each one of those petals. Can you see what I'm talking about there? So I'll probably have maybe, you know, 2 or 3 on each one. But one thing you want to make sure is they're not all the same length. I don't want little soldiers built up. So when I go to do these, and I'm always going to be pulling from the center out towards me, okay? So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to put my brush down, and I'm going to pull little fine lines like that. I don't know if you can see that or not. Can you see that? Okay. And you do that on each one of these petals. I'll just do one of the flowers here, so you don't have to watch me do everything. I do not outline the petals because remember you're on a dark background, and so if I outline them with black you wouldn't even see them because of the navy blue. So don't waste your time. If you you know, if you're on a lighter background, then I usually always do outline. So then the last thing you're going to do with a stylus, and you're going to load in your black, and you're going to just, now here's the thing, you can do 3 or 4, 5, and what that does is it varies the size. If you want them all the same size, then you need to make sure that you load each time. Okay? So like that. Now I didn't do it on this piece, but I'll tell you what I do like to do, and that is I do like to take and just put a few dots outside on my petals. And maybe a few more on the inside. I didn't do that on the original one I did, but if you'll look at a lot of my work, I do that a lot. I just think that it gives it a little more, so let me show you. So see how that one is versus this one that's like the same size all the way around. Which in order to get dots the same size all the way around, you have to load the stylus each time. So you would have to do here, so one, and you go back and do one, and go back and do one, and go back and do one. Okay. Now remember, this is Majolica, so that means it's already been glazed. It does not have to be glazed again. You're going to, I usually let my stuff dry overnight, and then fire it the next day, and you're going to fire this to a 06. Okay? So anyway, hope you guys had fun with this project. Let me move the camera back up a little bit here. Oops, almost knocked everything off on the floor. That's not good. So anyway, I hope you had a good time tonight. I look forward to doing another one next week. I won't be so far behind next week as I was this week, but I had several doctor's appointments, so that kind of took some time away from me. So anyway, I look forward to seeing you all next week. Have fun, stay safe, and God bless till next time. Bye, everyone.